thing I'll say is what the people in the United States call DDD Al-Qaeda, which is dismantle, disrupt, defeat Al-Qaeda. This falls under the umbrella of the U.S. transitioning from Iraq and into Afghanistan. The Iraq was seen by President Obama, who said if he was a senator he would not have voted to support the war in Iraq, has said that the war in Iraq was a diversion and an unnecessary act. He is looking to a very significant way to get out of Iraq, and the United States, which had at one time about 160,000 troops in Iraq, has less than 50,000 now. It is transitioning to a point where next summer it will have 0. That's the plan. It's suspected that Baghdad will ask the United States to maintain some for the purposes of training forces, but we're transitioning to none, which is pretty significant. And then, as the United States transitioned to Iraq, it's rededicating its focus into Afghanistan. So there are now roughly 100,000 U.S. troops in Afghanistan. There's a lot more attention, a lot more focus, a lot more money being spent there, primarily to deal with the perceived threat of Al-Qaeda reconstituting itself in a safe haven in Afghanistan from where it could plan and conduct terrorist operations against the United States or overseas interests. And this is the biggest thing they worry about. It's the point of the U.S. strategy review in Afghanistan last summer. You can read about it in the new Bob Woodward book. The Bush administration had very expansive goals for Afghanistan, specifically related to promoting democracy, promoting civil rights, promoting women's rights, promoting a Western model for how Afghanistan might want to run its country. The Obama administration is not that interested in that. And when you saw the, I would say, faulty, if not outright, stealing of the last election in Afghanistan, the Obama administration did not step in a big way to try to cancel the results. They did not try to remove Hamid Karzai through a coup. They did not, President Obama didn't even pick up the phone to call. President Obama has been much more hands-off with Afghanistan. He's using Secretary of State and Richard Holbrooke, who is a diplomat, who is the special representative to Afghanistan, and they're being much more hands-off on what goes on in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is seen as a place where the United States is doing a sort of development counterinsurgency strategy to prevent the reemergence of Al-Qaeda, and they know that there's going to have to be political reconciliation with the Taliban, which was also something that was unimaginable under the Bush administration, because under the sort of expansionist perspectives was that somehow the United States could achieve victory over the Taliban. And nobody in the Obama administration believes this. There's no such thing as victory. The United States won't win in Afghanistan. There will be a resolution based upon what Afghans need for their country, and the United States will sort of transition home if things go well. So that's a very explicit difference. And then the other big focus under the sort of disrupt, dismantle, defeat Al-Qaeda is Pakistan. Pakistan has received almost $20 billion from the United States since 9/11. A lot of this is for Pakistan military operations. The U.S. reimburses them. When the Pakistani military does things that the U.S. likes, the United States reimburses them. When they do things the United States doesn't like rush troops to India and deploy forces to Kashmir, they don't reimburse them. And part of that issue of going after the Al-Qaeda and its affiliates in the tribal areas of Pakistan is the unmanned drone campaign. There's been roughly 175, this campaign, which, if you're also interested, I wrote a book about this that I published 2 months ago. You can find it on Amazon. But the book, it deals a lot with these unmanned drone strikes in Pakistan. They began in 2004, 2005. The United States had a program by which it detained people for interrogation and brought them to third countries. That program ended in 2004, 2005, and the United States went from arresting people for interrogation to targeting them for killing through unmanned drones. And this has been done in very close collaboration with the Pakistani government. There were roughly 40, 45 drone strikes under President Bush. There have been almost 130 under President Obama, and they just keep escalating up and up and up. There were 21 just alone in September, in part because the monsoon beforehand, they can't fly in a monsoon, so they stopped. And And this, by most accounts, has put tremendous pressure on the safe haven in Pakistan. But the sort of Al-Qaeda and its affiliate groups also have countermeasures they can deal with this. Specifically, that they've started to leave the safe haven, what was the safe haven in Pakistan. They've moved to bigger cities like Quetta and Karachi. They've also knocked down transmitting towers. They've dispersed into smaller groups. And then the other thing they've done, which is shift a lot of focus to Somalia and Yemen, which are perceived by some people as being the next place where some amount of core Al-Qaeda leadership could regroup. The United States has also redoubled its cooperation with Yemen. You know, in the past, the U.S. was giving $30 to $50 million a year in aid to Yemen. This year will be $150 million in military aid explicitly, as well as a lot more U.S. people going there to train their forces. The United States has also used military force many times in Yemen. So in December 2009 through April 2010, there were roughly 5 strikes by U.S. naval ships into Yemen. Most of them did not go very well. One of them killed a deputy governor. One of them killed, according to Amnesty International, something like 40 civilians. The government in Yemen has said, please stop this for the time being, and the U.S. is going to do so. But the Obama administration is not going to allow the emergence of a safe haven in Yemen. And they're trying to work with the Yemeni government. The Yemeni government has very limited ability to go after these ungoverned spaces where I wouldn't say Al-Qaeda exists, but people who have great sympathies with Al-Qaeda exist. And then the other issue is Somalia. And Somalia, you know, since the early 1990s has had something like 16 different national governments. It is a place where the current ruling regime controls an area that's the size of roughly 1 square kilometers in Mogadishu. There are whole parts of the countries in Puntland where they basically are running their own state separate from Somalia. But there is a group called Al-Shabaab, which has tremendous sympathies with some elements of Al-Qaeda. And most threatening the United States, it also has a lot of sympathies from Somalian expatriates who live in the United States, specifically in the Midwest countries. So that's the sort of final thing I'll say is this refocus out of Iraq and into the threats that, you know, President Obama always, every time he talks about Afghanistan, he mentions 9/11, and the reason is he wants people to recognize, or he wants to give the impression that Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11, which it didn't, and he wants to remind the American citizens that Afghanistan, which did have something to do with 9/11, should be where the U.S. focuses its interest and attention. The real question is whether or not people in the United States are basically tired of being at war. There's been tens, if not hundreds of thousands of troops deployed since the fall of 2001. There have been something like 3 million U.S. service members who have served in Iraq and Afghanistan. There have been over 5,000 deaths. There are something like 50 to 60,000 people who have permanent disabilities as a result of the war. And it's also so it's a tremendous human cost, but it's also a tremendous financial cost. There are many different estimates of how much the wars will cost. Something like, people say Iraq could be something like $1 trillion. And Afghanistan is trending towards that figure as well. And that is why President Obama in July 2011 wants to begin drawing down forces from Afghanistan. But there's going to be a huge fight, you can wait and see, in the summer of 2011, because things aren't much better in Afghanistan. It's hard to imagine a situation where the U.S. will withdraw its forces in a quick way, which harms the Karzai government or whoever's ruling Afghanistan at the time. But there's going to be a lot more pressure from the president's own Democratic Party to begin leaving Afghanistan as soon as